Midnight Flight 666. While the dim light from the overhead lights flickered, casting a tired glow on the office, Dmitry's fingers quickly ran over the keyboard, making reports and completing tasks that accumulated like autumn leaves. The clock on the wall loomed like a sentry, reminding him of the passing minutes. His heart started pounding as he realized that he had lost track of time again. The train home at 11:45 a.m., his last hope for the evening, would not have waited for people like him. Sighing heavily, he gathered his things, feeling fatigue envelop him like a shroud, and went out into the cold night. When he reached the platform, panic seized him. The station, usually busy at night, was eerily quiet now, with only the faint echo of distant trains accompanying his heavy footsteps. His eyes widened in despair as he watched the taillights of his train disappear into the dark tunnel. A rush of adrenaline made him chase after her, but it was useless. He was stuck alone in the icy embrace of an empty station. Not knowing where to go, he sat down on a wooden bench, feeling the cold seep into his bones, and gave up under the weight of fatigue, which plunged him into a half-sleep. Time passed in a blur, and in this dreamlike state, Dmitry found that the world around him was blurring, turning into a tapestry of shadows and whispers. As he began to drift off to sleep, the distant sound of a train broke through the fog in his head, bringing him back to reality. Blinking rapidly, he shook off the remnants of fatigue and looked at the rails. The train was indeed approaching, but it was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its sleek black body shimmered menacingly in the light of the flashing lights, and there was not a single passenger in sight. Unable to make a reasonable choice, Dmitry felt an inexplicable urge to get into this sinister vehicle. When he went inside, he was overcome by a wave of anxiety mixed with a strange curiosity. The dimly lit train cars, immersed in an alarming silence, seemed to be buzzing with some kind of otherworldly energy. Dmitry sat down, and the doors immediately closed with a crash like a death knell. Now he was doomed, trapped in this empty vessel on a journey to nowhere. As the train sped into the night, the atmosphere changed dramatically. The once clean and sterile surroundings of the station had disappeared, replaced by the eerie sight of bizarre landscapes flashing past the windows, where shadows danced and moonlight barely penetrated the thick darkness. Strange sounds echoed throughout the train, disturbing creaks and groans of machinery, interspersed with whispers that seemed almost reasonable. Dmitry's heart began to pound wildly when he felt that he was not alone in this chilling space, but when he turned around, he saw that only empty chairs were looking at him, each of which seemed to be waiting for an unsuspecting soul. The train was getting more sinister by the minute. Unexplained phenomena, objects that he noticed out of the corner of his eye, and fleeting shadows that flashed by, began to bother him. Panic gripped him, but Dmitry knew he had to keep his composure. In this fog of uncertainty, he began to wonder, what did this train want from him? It dawned on him that perhaps this reflected his own inner turmoil, the weight of sleepless nights and unfulfilled dreams. He realized that in order to escape this surreal journey, he had to face the shadows inside himself, accept the darkness, before he could find the light in his home again. And so, he strengthened his resolve, ready to face everything that awaited him in the depths of this ghostly train journey. As Dmitry walked further down the carriage, he noticed that the interior had begun to change. The upholstery of the seats was covered with mold, the windows were fogging up from the inside, and the walls were slowly oozing black viscous liquid, as if the train itself was beginning to decompose. It smelled of rot and something metallic, with blood. There was a high-pitched squeal from the far carriage, half a screech, half a woman's scream. Dmitry shuddered. He walked slowly towards it, but the steps were difficult, as if the air was getting thicker, heavier. It's like a nightmare. He entered the next carriage. There were human shadows on the floor, outlined in bloody outlines, as if someone had cut people out of reality. Their faces were forever frozen in grimaces of horror. Among them, he noticed one figure that seemed fresh. He recognized her. Myself. This can't be happening. What is it? He whispered. But the shadow on the floor mimicked his movements. She opened her mouth and whispered back, "You're already with us." Dmitry staggered back, but someone was already standing behind him. He turned and saw the conductor, a figure in a long, threadbare frock coat with an empty, faceless mask instead of a face. He had a comm poster in his hands. "Bloody ticket," he said in a voice that sounded immediately in his head, like an inner voice in a moment of panic. "You haven't paid your debt." "What kind of debt? What do you need?" The conductor pointed to the windows. Dmitry looked and saw the past, his family, which he had long lost due to work and eternal employment, fragments of his dreams, friends whom he had pushed away. His face distorted in the reflection of the glass, turning into a skull. "You've passed your life by, Dmitry. This train is your chance to realize everything. Or stay here, forever." But then there's a sharp turn. Suddenly, the train braked sharply. The light blinked. On the platform is a little girl in an old-fashioned dress. Dmitry remembered. It was his younger sister, who died many years ago. She looked straight at him and nodded. "Choose one," the conductor whispered. "Either stay or jump into the past. Fix something, if you make it." Dmitry rushes to the door, but the train shakes again. It splits. One goes into darkness, the other into light. At the last moment, Dmitry makes a choice and jumps and wakes up at his office desk. 23:39. The light is blinking. Everything is as usual, only there's an iron comm poster on his desk, covered in rust and blood. And there's a ticket mark on his hand. Paid for, no right of return. Next story. Shadows under the earth. In a deserted hotel where time passes slowly, like sand through your fingers, something happened that changed the fate of Sheriffs Brandon and Clark forever. The scorching sun was setting when the police radio came to life with an alarming message. A call from a godforsaken motel in the middle of a vast desert. Murder. The sheriffs exchanged glances, a common challenge in an unusual place. The receptionist, a woman with nervous, shifty eyes, met them at the entrance. Her hands were shaking as she led the police down the shabby hallway. With every step, an unnatural, pungent smell grew in the air. "I heard screams," she whispered. "Terrible screams." But she didn't dare enter. Room 213. The door gave way with a soft creak. They had seen a lot in their 20 years of service. Shootings, accidents, murders. But what appeared before them did not fit into any framework of human cruelty. The young woman's body was torn in two. The chest is open, the insides. They were absent. Empty eye sockets stared at the ceiling, as if the victim had seen something unimaginable at the last moment. "Good God," Clark breathed, turning away. That could be so. Tear up a man. The medical examiners who arrived later just shook their heads. No internal organs, no eyes, no tongue. Like something it was feeding. The survey of staff and guests did not yield results. No one saw or heard anything. Just screams. The radio on Brandon's belt came to life when the sun was almost below the horizon. Two patrolmen who worked 5 kilometers from the motel reported a new discovery: a man's body on the side of the road, turned inside out, and the footprints, strange prints and splashes of blood going to the sandy rocks. "We'll follow where they lead," a voice said over the radio. "Wait for us," Brandon shouted, but it was too late. A hiss, crackling, and a scream that ended in mid-sentence. Brandon looked at Clark. "Let's go, right now." The sun finally disappeared below the horizon as their car sped along the deserted road. The headlights picked out abandoned buildings and twisted cacti from the darkness, like figures frozen in a silent scream. Brandon tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Something told him that what lay ahead did not fit into any police protocol. What awaited them in the shadow of the sandy cliffs should not have existed in this world. The entrance to the cave gaped with a black mouth, as if the earth itself had opened to swallow up those who dared to enter. The lanterns picked out damp stone walls from the darkness, overgrown with moss and some strange growths that looked like rotting cocoons. "Look," Clark whispered, pointing to the floor. And the blood. The footprints were unreal, as if something walked on all fours, but had claws the size of knives. Brandon turned on the radio, but the only response was static and distorted whispers. There was no signal. They walked deeper and deeper until they came to a massive metal door half filled with rocks. The inscription on it was barely legible. Syntech Laboratory, restricted area. Clark frowned. What the hell? A lab? Brandon tried to open the door, and it creaked, as if it had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Inside, they were greeted by the cold, clinical smell of formalin, blood, and something else. There are scattered folders, diagrams, test tubes, and broken containers on the walls. And in the corner, there are charred bodies in white coats. A video recording was flickering on one of the monitors. Brandon pressed play. Entry number 1087. A woman's voice, trembling, panicked. "The Obsidian 12 experiment is out of control. The subjects are mutating faster than we expected. Aggression, intelligence, ability to communicate. It's not a weapon anymore. This is something else. They're learning. If anyone finds it, leave. Just go away." Suddenly, there was a crunching sound in the hallway. Then, the screeching, not human. A silhouette emerged from the darkness, twisted, disfigured, with long claws and white deathly eyes. He growled and rushed forward. All hell broke loose. Clark fired the entire clip, but the creature only staggered. Brandon pulled out a shotgun and fired at point, blank range. The mutant shattered, leaving a mess of flesh and bones on the wall. But the first one was followed by the second one, then the third one. Then, a whole pack. They retreated, firing back and throwing grenades, but there seemed to be an infinite number of creatures. In one of the tunnels, Clark was grabbed by a paw, dragged out of the light, and tore in half. Brandon, mad with rage, shouted, shooting randomly until he reached a dead end. There's a trapdoor on the floor, with the inscription, "Emergency Exit, Protocol 27. He jumped off, and I woke up already under the open sky, in the desert. He groped his way, covered in blood, concussion, shot through the shoulder. A few hours later, the military found him, but it wasn't over yet. The epilogue. "How is he?" the man in the formal suit asked. "I'm awake. The psyche is stabilized. The memory is completely cleared," the doctor replied. "We told him that he had been in a car accident and was in a coma." "Great. The B-17 facility is under control. Delete all entries. The laboratory is cemented. The project is closed. In the hospital bed, Brandon stared at the ceiling. His eyes were blank. But deep inside, in his subconscious, in his dreams, there were still screams, blood, and darkness. He didn't remember, but he felt it. The end